Programming Python 101, Lesson 8, Introduction. This is user interactions. So there are no real new commands, but there's a lot of vocabulary. A function is a set of organized code that is used to perform a single action. So you can think of it as a chunk of code that we give a name, and we can call that name when we want it to run that specific chunk of code. A return statement is a statement that exits a function. It can pass a value back to whatever function called it. Scope is the visibility of a label or a variable within a program. You can have global scope, which means that anything within the program can see it, or local scope, which means it can be used only within that specific function. Function parameters are awesome. They allow us to pass information into a function to be used to usually compute a value or to give us some sort of information back out based on that information. Event listeners. So we're going to learn a little bit about using keyboard and mouse events, and to be able to do that we need to turn on a listener that listens for when that happens. An event handler responds to if it hears the mouse or the key being pressed or not pressed, whatever your event is. Keyboard events are whenever the user interacts with the keyboard. Okay, so there's a lot to this lesson. So we're going to talk about like defining a function and making your own function. So we've been using functions that programmers have already written for us, like turn left, print, turn right, forward. Those are all functions that have a bunch of code inside of them that we don't see. But we're going to start writing our own now. To create a function, we use the def, that means define. And you give it a name and parenthesis and the colon, and then any statement that is in the indent underneath it is going to be run when you call this function. So a simple function, this one's called foo. I don't know why they chose this, but it prints out the thing calling the foo function. You call it like this. So if I was able to play this, it says to click play, but there's no play button there, so I don't know why it's saying to do that. You can't actually interact with this one. But right now, if you said foo in parentheses, that's calling it. It would then call this function and print out calling the foo function. Function parameters, we can pass in values into a function to use it to compute values or give us other information. Those parameters are put inside the parentheses after the name of the function, and they are separated by commas. So scope. So in this example right here, I equals 0. So this variable I has been defined outside of this function, and that is a global variable. That I value can be used anywhere, and the value in it can be seen by any function within the program. This one has an I, and then it says global I. So if you need to change the variable, you must tell it that it's global. So in this you can see they want to change the value of I. So they're letting it know that this is the global I that we're going to change, so that it is aware that we're changing this variable for every other function in the program. Now, if you wanted to change the I value, but only within this function, you wouldn't use the word global. You would just say I equals 0, and then if we added 1 to it, that's the local scope. So no one else knows that we messed with that variable. So this example here, they are going to import a turtle and run you through a function. This function creates a turtle at an X and a Y location. The square shape pen up speed goes to that location and basically stamps it down. When I click play on it, there are those 3 turtles that it created. Responding to key presses. So on key is the method that we're going to use to add interactive interactivity to our turtle project. So there's two parameters. It can check for up or down, or the first parameter rather is the function you want to run in response to the key. The second one is which key has been pressed down. So for example, if screen.on key, so I've checked for the key to be pressed, I want to call whatever this function is if that key has been pressed. So here's an example. On screen, screen.on key, I want to call the jump function if the spacebar is pressed. So we have to listen for keys to be pressed. Screen.listen is telling it that we want it to listen. But if you only have to call it once, even if you have more than one on key, you don't have to tell it to keep listening more than that. Now, when you want to detect that a key has been pressed, if you look down in this example, it's going to call that F if the up arrow has been pressed. So if we play this right now in this example and you press the up arrow, it's telling me that I pressed the up arrow. This one responds to the right arrow. So I'm going to click play here. And when I press the right key, it's going to move. And there he goes off the screen. Move the turtle right off the screen. We can also add a delay with timers. So when we add a timer, it tells us which function we want to delay and how long we want to delay it for. That lets us wait for things before we make them occur, which is really useful because otherwise things happen right away in a program. So we're going to be coding an asteroids game. You can see I am already done, but you're going to be coding it. You're going to go all the way through here to code this asteroids game. And the way this game looks when you are completely finished with it is that you can try to get through these asteroids without hitting them. Now, the code that's there isn't complete by any means. It lets you control the ship. And that's about it, okay? Here are some examples of things that you can do. Hide the ship if it touches an asteroid. Every time the ship moves forward, loop through a list of asteroids. Create a function that shoots a bullet. That's extremely advanced. If you want to do that one, I would highly suggest that you go forward a lesson and look at that before you do it. The easiest one is probably to hide the asteroid if you touch it. So that might be the easiest one for you to try for the coding challenge after coding this. There is a review and then a quiz at the end.